The women would be out on the porch talking, wrapped in blankets, out on the swings, and the men would be in the parlor. But I constantly hear this word, brood woman. Yeah, Mary was a brood woman. That was my great great grandmother. My ancestors were enslaved, was just 6 miles away from the farm I grew up knowing as home. And it was a 300-acre farm that was left by my great grandfather. And I was amazed that it was so close by. And the stories I heard about it, that it was difficult for the Union Army to find. And why would they be looking? Because Jeb Stuart, who is the head of the Confederate cavalry, was often hosted there and brought his troops there for R&R. Robert E. Lee came there to purchase a horse.
Your great great grandmother, Mary, was a slave in the 1850s, and she was on the Bower plantation in Jefferson County, West Virginia. Now, you say your last name, Fox, actually came from Mary when she was attempting to escape. Explain that.
Someone told on her from the quarter. That's what they called the community where the enslaved were lived. They called it the quarter. When the overseer caught her in the middle of the night, "Where are you going?" and she turned around with some small portion of food in her hand, saying, "Oh, I'm just going to feed some little baby foxes, been abandoned by their mama." But she had a lot more food sewn into the hems of her skirt.
Thus, those little baby foxes, in reality, were Mary's five children. What year was that?
It was in 1855. My great grandfather was 10 years old, and he had siblings. He was the oldest,
What ended
so
up happening to her?
she was tied to a wagon wheel and she was beaten. Then she learned the man who was her conspirator was found dead down along the Opequon Creek. She took her life.
And her children, after her death, what happened to them?
They took the code word as their name. They were called the Foxes. After she took her life, the man who owned her, Adam Stephen Dandridge II, went off on a 4-day drunk. Why would he have such a strong emotion about the death of a slave woman? I think Adam Stephen Dandridge II is my great great grandfather. The old man, as they called him. He had the children brought into the house, the main house. They were taught skills, horseshoeing, working with metal. My great grandfather, John, was taught to work with wood. And he had a lot of freedoms. He was sent team of horses in a wagon. He'd go get supplies or deliver things to where the supply trains would come in. He would take runaways from other plantations. Quakers would come down from Pennsylvania for their supplies, and runaways climb underneath the hay on their wagons and go back up into Pennsylvania to freedom.
Charles, over the years, you've learned a lot about the many branches of your family tree. And you had a big surprise in 1992 while working with the Maryland Film Commission. What happened?
I sat down for coffee for a staff meeting, and Ann Hartman and I were the first two there. And during a conversation, we discovered that she was the descendant of the family that owned my ancestors at the Bower. I said, I found the name of the family. She says, "Oh, what was it?" I said, "Dandridge." She hesitated for a minute. She said, "That was my maiden name." I said, "Yeah, but this Dandridge family, they owned a plantation in Jefferson County called the Bower." "Oh my God." She says, "That's my family." And then she says, "Fox. I always heard the Fox name, but I just never thought to associate it with you." I said, "Well, it was a code word."
Charles, as you talk with more relatives, learning other family stories, pulling back dusty layers of history, talk about some of the life lessons you've learned.
I'm very proud. I'm the third generation born free. I'm very proud of what I have learned from my ancestors, and what I've learned from them is what my mother used to say: if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything. And that, in fact, is on our family crest that my father had made for me when I was 9 years old. Faire sans dire, to do without saying. Something else I've learned is I've learned how to take the word impossible and make it into I'm possible.
And of course, Mary's advice.
Never hate, or it will infect you and your children and your children's children. Sometimes it makes me cry, Kathryn. It's so humbling. It's really humbling One thing I'm presenting in my presentation is Leviticus. It's the third book in the Old Testament, but it's the third book in the Torah. Leviticus 25, verses 44 through 46. And it's talking about you have the right to have slaves and you have right to make slaves from the nations around you. It's a book of social laws. And why are we still carrying a book to justify slavery? Why haven't we evolved? It's the only way we're going to have the peace and the harmony and the productive society that we all want.
Something for all of us to reflect on. Charles Fox, General Manager of WCSU FM on the campus of Central State University. You're going to have a wonderful show, and thank you for giving us a glimpse into your family ancestry.
Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you.